Welcome to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. And now here's your host, Wade T. Lightheart.
What if you could double your energy naturally without caffeine or stimulants in just 3 short months? It's not only possible, you can transform every aspect of your health if you follow the 12-week blueprint we've created for you in the Awesome Health System. The Awesome Health System is a free course where you receive a daily video lesson spanning the most cutting-edge secrets for air, water, exercise, sunshine, optimizers, mindset, and education. It's something most companies would charge hundreds of dollars for, yet you get it for free when you go to bioptimizers.com. To access your course, register to download the PDF report called 3 Phases of Bioptimization, which gets you access to the report and daily access to the first lesson in the 12-week, 84-day Awesome Health course.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It's Wade T. Lightheart from Bioptimizers with another edition of the Awesome Health Podcast. And today, we are going to talk about the 3 absolutely essential elements to creating lasting health change. And today we are joined by Meredith Oke, who is the co-founder of the Quantum Biology Collective and QuantumHealth TV organizations focused on decentralizing health education, where medical experts break down the emerging science of circadian health and quantum biology. As an ICF accredited executive coach, Meredith has lived and worked on 3 continents, helping clients from all over the world to improve their lives by changing their beliefs and habits. She began her career working in media, covering entertainment and interviewing movie stars before she shifted into communications and coaching. Now, through the Quantum Biology Collective, she is supporting the education of health practitioners to make the shift to the new paradigm of quantum biology on how light impacts health. Meredith, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Wade. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And I appreciate that you're outside.
Yeah, thanks. Ironically, for those who are just listening on the podcast, I'm here in Sedona, Arizona, doing some NAD treatments and getting eaten by mosquitoes outside because I'm not in my normal studio, but it's great to be outside in the sunshine. And I always feel better when I spend time outdoors. This is one of the things that I've noticed, which is ironic because I run a company where I'm on my computer more than I want to be. And I come here to Sedona, Arizona. It's like 300 plus days of sunshine. And I'm struck by how well I feel. And that kind of correlates to what you talk about. Can you share how you've come to this place of quantum biology and kind of stepping out from where medical science leaves people kind of hanging in the lurch and what your whole field is? Because I know you used to be an executive coach and then you've kind of moved into this field. So if you can kind of give us the journey up to this point, that might help for our listeners.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah. And I hear that so often, and I've heard it and feel it myself, is that when we're outside, we just feel better. Right. And that's because that's where we evolve. That's where we're meant to be. That's where our cells know what to do and they come alive. Yeah. So my journey is very similar, I think, to a lot of people in the alternative health field, which is that I had symptoms that traditional medicine could not help me with. And in my case, it was chronic fatigue, which is one of the main symptoms of other chronic illness and a chronic illness in itself. And the doctors just run their labs and they're like, yeah, you're fine. And but I don't feel fine. Right. So we're left in that gray area of where our quality of life is not where we need it to be. But it doesn't feel like there's a solution. And in my case, I did a lot of great work with my diet. I saw a lot of natural health practitioners and it made a difference, but I still couldn't get past this the last part of this, I still needed to manage my activities around my fatigue. I couldn't just live through my day and know that I was going to have enough energy to do it. So that led me down this rabbit hole of studying the impact of light on health and understanding that the light environment that we put ourselves in affects every single aspect of our health, everything. And so if we are, looking at a screen right before bed, if we're under LED lights all day, if we're on our computers at work all day, we're kind of basically putting ourselves in an illness enhancing environment. When we go outside, I know a lot of us were raised to fear the sun, that the sun is basically the human center for healing and optimal health. So we have it flipped around. We spend all of our time under light that makes us feel sick, and very little time outside where our cells know what to do and can heal and be restored and repaired and get on track. And so there's a whole bunch of different reasons for that. The light itself is damaging to our cells, but it also throws off our circadian rhythm. And our circadian rhythm controls every aspect of
indoor light, that is.
Yes. Yes, exactly. So when we're inside under artificial light, those frequencies are not the same as what's happening outside. And we're programmed to be in tune with the light cycles of the sun. So when we go and spend most of our time in artificial light, which has completely different frequencies, we throw off all of our circadian clocks. We have a clock in every single cell of our body. And if those clocks are all out of sync, if you think about what would happen if every device and every clock in your house showed a different time and you were relying on them to know what to do, it would be chaos. And that's what we do to our cells when we spend time in front of computers under LED or fluorescent lights, when we don't go outside very often, is that we throw our system into chaos and it doesn't know what to do. And the number one symptom for that is happening is fatigue, but it also plays into everything else, from obesity to cancer to anxiety to depression. Everything.
This is one of I call it the diseases of civilization.
Yes.
And primarily our biological models are based on chemical ideologies, and that we look at energy metabolism, we look at it healing, we look at a lot of the testing that goes on in our medical model is all through a chemistry model, which is one lens to look at things, but it's within a very narrow frame. And you bring up something that was really important, and that's light. And for those who don't know, there's a process called electron covalent transfer inside the energy metabolism of our cells. And basically, it's an electron going from one place to another. And that exchange creates the movement of energy and triggers biochemical processes, activating enzymatic transferase, and then there is the activation of various chemical components. Now, what our science are doing is they're looking at the chemical compounds. They're looking at step down. They're looking at very much downstream from what's happening upstream. And now the research is leaning towards mitochondrial function and how do we convert. And so I always say that light is the most efficient form of transfer of energy. And if you want to take a nice healthy vacation, you don't think of going to the Arctic in the middle of the winter when it's dark all year long, cold. You think of going to a warm, sunny, tropical beach. Well, why do we automatically assume that or think that or intuit that inside of our bodies? Well, because we're a tropical species and we're designed and adapted to that. How did you come into this whole ideology about light exposure and its capabilities of healing?
So I really got into it from a place of desperation, right? I had heard about it. I had seen some interviews. There's a neurosurgeon called Dr. Jack Cruz, and I had seen an interview with him where he talked about the importance of light. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And I made a few small changes, but I didn't really think about it too much. And then a year later, I was up against a wall where I had tried everything to feel better, and I was out of options. And I had one of those moments where, it's like kind of a quantum entanglement moment where I sort of sat with myself and I was like, okay, there must be something I'm missing. Like there must be some avenue that I can go down, because I don't believe that, at the time I was in my 30s, I'm like, I just don't believe that I'm supposed to spend the next 50 years feeling like crap. Like that just can't be the way life is meant to go. And then even though doctors were like, oh, you have young kids, like you're supposed to feel tired. I'm like, no, this, I'm not just tired. Like there's something else, and this can't just be it. And from that place of like total surrender, like I will do whatever, just there must be another way. I flashed back to that interview, and I went back and watched it again from the point of view of like, what if it was this? And the more that I researched, the more that I started to understand that we don't know. I mean, the average person, you're extremely well versed in this, which is fantastic. But, most people have no idea that the light environment matters. And the more I learned, the more I realized just how much. Like you could argue that light is more important than food, I think, to overall health. And so at first it was like, oh my God, I have something else to do that could help. But then my next thought was like, why doesn't anyone know about this? And the reason is because there's multiple reasons, but it's quite complicated. It's really not, there's not a lot of money to be made on telling people to spend more time outside. Like blue blocking glasses are great. And there's some red light therapy and red lights, which are wonderful, but that's kind of it. Like there's not much to be done. And the science is quite complex, as you were talking about before. And to understand that light matters, you need to look at life, as you were just saying, look at health from a different perspective. It's a paradigm shift out of the biochemical model into like a quantum biologic model, which nobody has quite wrapped their heads around yet. So my sort of inner need to solve hard problems came to the fore. And I decided to interview as many people as I could find who had expertise, not just in researching light, but working with clients and using light protocols with their clients, in as well as, high quality supplements and diet changes and movement and things like that. And what I found was that the results that people were getting when they included light product protocols were really, really crazy. Like it makes such a huge difference. And, it's people with like diabetes and all of these, so many different things that people were being able to get off their medications just by changing their light environments when I started to interview these doctors. So I just decided to build a communication business around finding ways to communicate this message to people, because it's the science might be complex, but at the end of the day, the actual changes are quite simple and doable if we feel motivated enough.
Yeah, genius usually runs to simplicity. Years ago, an influential book I read was called Sunlight. And inside it was referring to a Swiss doctor, Dr. Rollier, who around the turn of last century, was treating cases of tuberculosis and a variety of healing or, conditions that they had no medical treatments for at the time. And he would take people to different altitudes in the Swiss Alps, and they would recover. And he developed these based on the frequencies at the different altitudes. It was a very sophisticated system. And of course, this is around the time of, we're still dealing, this is, around the time of the Copenhagen conference in physics. And we're, Planck and Einstein are arguing, between the Newtonian paradigm and the quantum reality. And yet he was able to produce these results. And in fact, there was a number of legendary health practitioners, including Paul Bragg, who was healed by Dr. Rollier, as well as the Juice Man. He was also had experience with that. These were sickly kids, and they spend a lot of times outdoors. But I want to make this connection to physics. you make this referral, and I think this is one of the ones where people kind of check out. And I want to bridge that gap for people, because I hear a lot about this word. It's thrown around a lot, but very seldom is it explained to the listener in an understanding they might grasp. So can you talk about quantum biology or quantum entanglement, or what this quantum world entails? Because it's a very strange world. I got a little bit of a physics aptitude, and so I'm fascinated with these concepts, but most people, it's way out of the jello tree. So can we kind of roll that back, and what does the quantum biology collective, what does quantum biology mean? How does that all interrelate in your work?
Right. So absolutely. And first of all, I want to say, like, I do not have an aptitude for physics. So when I talk about these concepts, it's from, I was an English major. So for me, it's about understanding how the concepts work together and how they work within our life, and what the overall paradigm shift is. If you want to jump in and add some physics to it, that would be beautiful. But you mentioned just now, there was, at one point, the debate of whether quantum mechanics actually was real. And the quantum physicists that debate has subsided, and there's now classical physics and quantum physics. And the quantum physics is where all the weird stuff happens that, all the woo-woo people like to say that talk about quantum physics because it's, spooky action at a distance and things being able to communicate with each other without being in the same place and all of these kinds of things. What's happening now is that that science has, I hesitate to use the word accepted, but it is definitely agreed upon that quantum physics and quantum mechanics is a real thing, and that at the subatomic level, there's all kinds of crazy stuff going on. The conversation now that is just beginning to happen is that, it became accepted that quantum mechanical processes are real. The conclusion that
just to clarify for people, that is, in simple terms, going back to the debate, the act of observation of a phenomenon, including running a scientific experiment, influences the outcome. And therefore, the debate was between classic physics and quantum mechanics, is that Einstein wanted a world independent, sort of like a clockwork machine that wound up and was independent of humans. And quantum physics said, no, the universe and humans are inherently part of the same thing. Therefore, say your intention, your observation, even without intention, was able to influence the outcome of experiments. And this gave birth to some of the esoteric or occult practices that have been practiced by various cultures throughout history. The act of praying, the art of manifestation, holding something in mind and increasing the likelihood of that happening, which is essentially all potentials exist, all possibilities exist. And the likelihood of something coming to fruition was the collapse of the wave function in the Dirac equation, where potentiality collapse into reality. And that is what we call manifestation, or the appearance of, or the disappearance of, is also part of that. And that's where things get very strange. But we all have experienced this when you set your keys right there by the door and suddenly they're gone, and you look through the whole house and you come back 10 minutes later and the keys are back there where you are, and you're like, wait a minute, were those keys really there? And the quantum physicist says, well, no, you were actually jumping between realities where the keys were there and the keys weren't there. You just happened to hold in mind at the right time where the keys were, and that's what happened. And of course, the more you practice it, and Joe Dispenza gets really into this, and he's very popular about creating these unusual type events when you collectively take groups of people, because you increase the intensity of the wave for likely outcomes. All that to say, just to bring you back to the quantum biology for people. So I'm trying to contextualize, woo into wow. so that we can kind of clarify what you're getting at. But going back to the Quantum Biology Collective and your work, how does that all relate? And if there's anything there that I said that you don't feel in alignment, please correct me.
No, I think you just explained really beautifully the kind of practical experiences of what quantum mechanics explains through physics, and where they came to, which is the observer effect. And well, is it a particle or a wave? And it's like, well, it depends. It's both, right? And that was kind of the moment where classical physics started to fall apart, because from a Newtonian perspective on the world, like everything is either one thing or the other. It's this or it's that. And it's all very mechanistic and very biochemical. As you were saying earlier, right? Where it's like this leads to that, leads to that, leads to that. Where in quantum physics, it's more instantaneous. And it could be one thing and it could be another. And it depends on, no one's quite sure what.
Well, the interesting part about the Newtonian paradigm, and I love this topic, is that it offers a certain range of predictability in the observable world. And so it's got these nice kind of tight corners and straight lines, and where it starts to break down is on the outside edges of that model. And so what people go, well, how can both simultaneously exist? Neither one is a perfect representation of anything, but by understanding the mechanics of each one of those, the Newtonian paradigm, which is, A goes to B, B goes to C, C goes to D, but who shot the original billiard ball kind of thing?
Yeah.
No one knows. And the things can't break down at the potential, like the universe coming into play, or the Big Bang theory, which has recently just been shattered with the Webb satellite things, that the universe is way different than we thought, and there doesn't appear to be a Big Bang. hold the
spoon. I hesitated to use the word accepted science, now.
And quantum is the part that starts to predict the unpredictable or the unlikely specifically. So, for example, quantum or Newtonian physics would say, okay, there's been 1,000 black crows reproduced over the course of these generations of crows. The likelihood that the next crow being created is going to be black, but there's a white crow. Yes. Suddenly, and we go, why did that crow happen? And they go, well, it's a mutation. That is put out as noise in the system. Or the quantum people said, no, there was always the potential for a white crow, and then after 1,000 times, the white crow emerged from the black crow field. And David Boehm is probably one of the best on these kind of descriptions of how these fields work. Is a very great physicist that has explained a lot of these phenomena in terms that people can understand. So I recommend his books. But continue on.
Yes, absolutely. And that's also the crow metaphor works nicely with sort of what's happening in science right now, which is that we come up with a certain way of understanding observable reality, and then we create a construct around it. And then over time, we start to observe phenomena that don't fit in to that framework. And so I'm drawing a lot on Kuhn here and his theories of scientific revolution, right? And so we put those aside. Oh, well, that was an anomaly, or that kind of this and that kind of that. But if enough of those anomalies build up, if enough of these pieces of evidence that don't fit within the accepted framework build up over time, then at some point you're like, okay, well, we need a new framework. And so right now the framework is biochemistry, and there's all of these pieces of evidence building up that biochemistry isn't enough to explain, and a lot of which I would say argue is most chronic illness, right? Like the chronic illness we were talking about earlier, where doctors are like, yeah, I don't know, you're fine, you're just tired, whatever, deal with it. Those are all things that, because they can't be explained by the biochemical tests that they run, so they're just kind of pushed to the side, or they're put in some kind of amorphous fibromyalgia bucket, or they're, because we don't have the right framework to explain it. And back to quantum mechanics. So it became accepted that quantum mechanics existed and was a real thing. However, only in cold, dark places, and quantum mechanical processes could not happen in living systems. And this is what classical physicists mostly are still taught even today. I've seen some lively Twitter debates from people who study quantum biology on this. And it was only in about 2000, the early 2000s, there was some work done by a physicist called Jim Al-Khalili. He met with a biologist at a conference. They started to talk, and they realized that their siloed institutions never really, their separate academic track never talked to each other. And so these two guys were like, what if you're a biologist and I'm a physicist? What if we got together and shared to see if our separate approaches could shed light on each other's problems? And they started to do work together, and they actually ended up, I'll use the word proving, but again, they ended up proving that quantum mechanical processes do happen in living systems. And the experiments that they did were with birds and how they migrate. And I can't get into the technical details, but basically birds use quantum mechanics to migrate around the world and to know where to go when they fly. And so once that became established, you had people like Dr. Jack Kruse start to connect dots and say, okay, well, if quantum mechanical processes can happen inside living systems, what does that mean in terms of what light is doing with how light is talking to our mitochondria and how our bodies are processing light? And from that perspective, when you sort of depart from the biochemical model where everything has to be this very direct cause and effect, we are beings of light communicating with the light around us at all times.
Yeah. So I think to clarify, for individuals who might be struggling with this conceptual idea, if you take the atomic structure of things, you keep breaking things down into molecules and then atoms and then subatomic particles, and there's no end to it keeps getting smaller and smaller and as they say, stranger and stranger. And they actually use these terms in physics, which is fascinating. However, if you get down small enough, you realize there's nothing there. So this is where the separation between the atom and the wave are. Like, in other words, matter versus energy, which was beautifully illustrated in E equals mc squared. That was the Einsteinian component. And so the quantum model is saying that, well, they exist simultaneously. And so we think of ourselves as a separate from the universe because the way our brain processes information, it creates, there's a me in here and a world out there. However, the quantum aspect would look at it as, no, it's all one field of different fluctuations that you call you a you, but you're still the universe itself. It's only a point of reference. And that point of reference, though, is anchored and embedded deeply into the psyche and our point of perception. And this is where physics, I think, gets esoterical, or some people would say spiritual or strange, in that this is kind of where mystics from around the world, and I've studied extensively in mystic traditions, said that the ego is the cause of all suffering. The idea that there's a separate you from all that is where suffering is, and that relates to what makes you ill, both mentally, physically, emotionally. And pain or suffering, lack of energy, whatever, is really a disruption in the flow of energy inside the body. And it's meant as a way to heighten our state of awareness. And what you're sharing with the audience, if I heard you correctly, is that, hey, I'm in pain. I'm not feeling like I should. I don't have enough energy. I'm not able to access this field of energy, which is normal for my personality. And intuitively, I understand that. But I'm being told by people within a narrow but certain amount of predictable paradigm that I'm not right. Yet you decided that, well, their model wasn't working. You needed to move to a different model. You embraced this quantum model that we're energy. And then by exposing to light, which is, many people would say, in a form of intelligence, a form of information, by increasing the amount of information or accessible energy in the body, your body was able to intuitively correct the imbalances that was leading to the fatigue. Would that be kind of how your story went?
And now for a Bioptimizers fixed digestion tip: supercharge your protein shake. Everyone knows protein shakes are a great way to sneak in extra protein, build more muscle, even replace meals and burn more fat. The problem is the highest quality protein typically absorbs at around 40%. One way to fix this and dramatically increase how quickly and effective your protein shake digests is to add 2 to 3 capsules of masszymes into your shake. One research study showed that pre-digested protein during a meal increased muscle growth significantly. To take advantage of this, just blend the open capsules into your shake, and within 15 minutes or less, the enzymes will have begun to break down the protein into amino acids. This can make your shakes at least 2 to 3 times more potent. Some people do this and sip on their shake while lifting to provide their muscles with a steady stream of amino acids during their workout. To save 10% on masszymes, use the code SHAKE10, that's SHAKE10, at masszymes.com. That's SHAKE10 at masszymes.com.
I had not thought of it in that way, but it's a beautiful articulation of it. Absolutely. I love this, Wade. This is such a fun conversation. I usually just talk about blue blockers and light bulbs. I love I love where we're going. And that is absolutely it, is the effects of just spending more time outside are, they start on the physical level, as you were saying, like we just feel better outside.
Well, share your story.
Yeah.
Why not just share your story specifically? What happened to you when you came to this conclusion and started experimenting with it? Like,
so
you committed to it.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because I had committed to this idea intellectually and spiritually and emotionally for many years, all of the ideas that we're talking about here. And familiar with many of the books that you mentioned, and had done a lot of work on breaking down negative beliefs and, emotional mastery, and the idea that we are connected to more than ourselves, and believing in something bigger than myself and connecting to that and allowing it into my life and allowing it to support me and help me. And yet I still wasn't feeling well. And I realized there's kind of like 2 pillars. There's self-mastery, but then there's also like the mastery of your environment. And I would read these books, but I would read them on an iPad before I went to sleep. Right. And so I was giving my mind all of the sustenance that it needed to make these connections, but I was putting my physical body in an environment that was degrading it. And so to look at an iPad that's on factory settings before bed is so deeply damaging. It just, you ruin your entire night of sleep just doing that for 20 minutes. And so when I started to mitigate the man-made light that I was putting my skin and my eyes in at incorrect times of day, and maximizing the environment that my body had evolved to thrive in, it actually elevated all of the other work that I'd already been doing, all of that other work that we do, that I'd done sort of intellectually, emotionally, and spiritually. And it completed the it brought a sense of completion, and continues to, because it's a journey, as we all know. But it also humbled me that in it, to help me realize that what we do with our physical apparatus matters, and where we put it matters, and that to be in nature and be connected to those cycles, the cycle of the seasons and the cycle of the light, and to start to notice and to be oriented around, I always know which way east is, because I most mornings am outside at sunrise, so that those light frequencies can stimulate my hormone production and all the other things. I am, by adopting those habits, connecting to that larger force that I had a much more intellectual relationship with when I was just doing it through sort of reading and meditation and personal work, but hadn't connected it out to where I was putting my body in time and space.
I think a lot of people are starting to come to the realization, and I do say this is both the opportunity and, of course, the agency of distress, which is the technological sophistication of society, which has embedded humans largely inside, largely in front of screens, under these light forms that are disruptive, to say the least. And this is driving a level of collective awareness of, wait a second, something's wrong here with the paradigm that we've embarked on, and we need to come up with a new paradigm. And of course, pain's a great teacher, suffering's a great teacher. But I would say humans are not just made of flesh and bones. They're made up of ideas, and they're made up of emotions, and they're made up of thoughts, and they're made up of expression. And if you look at the human experience, well, what's left after we're gone? Basically engineering and art. There's buildings and then there's stories.
Yeah.
So it would seem that what we do and how we feel or think or express those are the essence of what remains from us in the beginning. So I think it's important for people to consider what it is to be a human. Is it to be a human to go sit in front of a computer and make a bunch of money and buy a bunch of things? And that's all well and fine. And I think that's an aspect of life. However, there's what gives the meaning of life is nothing of those things. Sense of purpose. There's people who have found their sense of purpose in the willingness to die for a particular cause, whether that's for a country, whether that's for an ideology, whether that's for a religion. And it's an interesting component. Or people who would accept death rather than change those things. So there are indications that deep within the psyche of what we are, that there are these areas of the human condition which are far greater and far more important in our sustainment than just simply living. I refer to the biblical textures, man does not bread alone by the word of God being the energetic vibratory energy which permeates the universe, which has been measured in physics, by the way, for people who don't want to know, or who are interested. But this is also echoed through Ayurvedic science. It's echoed in ancient Chinese science. So there are references to some Sumerian texts, the Persian texts of Zoroaster. And so now we're dealing into not just physics, but metaphysics. Metaphysics. What is metaphysics? Metaphysics is the physics of that which is not necessarily observable through the Newtonian paradigm, but is physics. And the physics of living require source of light, which is energy, the infinite supply. Everything is condensed energy from a certain perspective. So how you're talking about these various discoveries of yourself as a woman in the world, as a human being existing in this reality. And there was studies that you were doing, psychological, physiological, emotional, personal development, which are meaningful and had a certain amount of the externalized light source coming into that. This began to amplify it, which would indicate, if I heard you correctly, that light, the intelligent energy, which expresses through where you're focusing on in those particular fields, which make up the whole human as opposed to just flesh and bones and chemical reactions. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, that's a beautiful expression of it, Wade. I love it. And the frequencies of natural light are changing minute by minute, and every moment has a message for our body. Every moment is talking to our cells. And the idea of that it's really extraordinary. And from a practical perspective, what that means is that every minute we spend outside or near an open window, we're healing ourselves in some capacity. So I don't, expect people that, I'm on my computer as well, but I get up every half an hour and go outside, even for 2 minutes, because as you're saying, from a quantum perspective, one small change can have a huge asymmetric effect. And to just include this idea of light into our concept of health, it's transformative in all of the ways that you just explained, spiritually, emotionally, mentally, and of course physically, in terms of how we feel.
So I want to move into that practicality. So someone out there listening is saying, hey, sounds like a lot of woo. I'm not so sure about these guys, but I've come to my wit's end. I've tried all these different interventions and methodologies to varying degrees of responsiveness or positive or negative response, but I'm still not feeling the way I intuitively sense that I could feel. There seems to be a gap between where I am and what I'd like to be, whether that is called you want to heal from something or you just want to express more of yourself. What are some practical things that people can do to maybe systematically starting to experience what you've experienced, what I've experienced, and many others have experienced in regards to, some people would call it light therapy. What are some practical things that you would suggest for people to start running their own experiments and move out into the woo, from the woo to the wow?
Woo to wow, I love it. So there are three things to think about. And I make them incredibly, incredibly simple, right? It's like, number one, decrease toxic light. Number two, increase healing light. And then the third one is find some community, whether it's online or in person, of people who are doing those other two things. So the decrease in toxic light is mainly our screens and our light bulbs. And it's not that you can decrease toxic light just by making sure that you expose yourself to different things. Be mindful of the time of day that you're exposing yourselves to different things. So being on your laptop at noon in the summer is not that big a deal. Being on your laptop at 9:00 at night in January is hugely disruptive, because the frequencies coming out of a laptop are so bright, it's telling your body that it's solar noon in the middle of summer. And so as I was saying earlier, if we move in and out of all of these different light signals, our body gets thrown into chaos because it doesn't know what to do. So we want to try keep our indoor light as lined up as close as possible to our outdoor light. So no screens before bed. In the morning, early morning is a key time. You can start having a good night's sleep from the minute you wake up by going outside instead of going on a device first thing in the morning. sunrise is ideal, but whatever time you wake up outside, and take periodic breaks outside during the day. You can mitigate the light coming out of your screens with software. And at night, if you do, I like to watch a movie with my husband sometimes. So we put on our blue blockers. We have our children put on their blue blockers. They don't like it, but they would prefer to, I'm like, well, you can play Fortnite with blue blockers on or not play Fortnite. Those are the options. So I think blue blocking glasses are a key investment, unless you're somebody who wants to turn off everything and just have candles after sunset. You need to have some blue blockers. And then once the sun starts to set, we make sure that all of those bright overhead LEDs are off and switch to incandescent light bulbs in lamps that are lower to the ground, because everything makes a difference, right? Like the sun is not overhead in the evening, so you don't want a light coming from overhead. The angle is also sending a incorrect circadian signal. So low light, low to the ground in the evening, no bright lights, blue blockers if you are in front of a screen or TV. And yeah, just those
Very
few
interesting.
changes. Yeah.
And then you mentioned one other thing, and that is connecting with the community or people who are kind of engaged in this. Someone's out in the middle of Nantucket. Where do they go? How do they find people and connect? What would your suggestions be around that?
So there are a lot of people online who are, if you put quantum biology as a hashtag into Instagram or something like that, you'll find lots of people. We have a practitioner directory where you can put in the symptom that you have, and you'll find any practitioner that's listed will be will use light protocols in addition to whatever else their area of expertise is. So you can find a practitioner that way. And yeah, I think what I have found is that people, we kind of find each other, and even just having, in whatever social media you is your favorite, to have a few people that you follow who talk about this, because it's so easy. We're really like swimming against the current with these protocols, as you mentioned. Like our modern lifestyle habits are not at all, people do not think about these things at all. So just to have some source somewhere in your life where you're exposed to the message, or someone's mentioning about watching a sunrise, or they're talking about wearing their blue blockers, and it's like, oh yeah, I'm not the only person in the world. Because we're at the beginning of the beginning of the beginning of understanding all of this. So it's not mainstream at all. So it can feel a little lonely. And that's why community is so important to changing a habit. Just like if someone was recovering from an addiction, you go and find other people who are doing that or have done it successfully and spend some time with them. It's the same thing with changing any habit, including our light habits.
Where do people reach you, and where we can find out more about quantum health, your work, and embrace this kind of new paradigm of possibility?
So we are at QuantumBiologyCollective.org. And I'm just a messenger. I interview a lot of people who are really geniuses in this area. And I am just somebody who carries that message, hopefully in a way that is easy for people to absorb and digest. And so the QuantumBiologyCollective.org, as I mentioned, that's where the practitioner directory is. And you can come and follow us on Instagram at QuantumHealth TV. We feature different people all of the time, sharing messages about quantum biology and circadian biology and light.
Meredith, has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed slipping into the power of possibility and engaging in energizing ourselves with light for healing and transformation. It's a big part of my own life. We outline it in the Awesome Health formula, of course, in our website, our course, which is free. We'll give away our course, but be sure to check out Meredith's groups. All the links are here, as well as her social media that she referred to. Go in there, check it out. Don't be isolated. embrace the new paradigm, which is really an old paradigm that is repackaged into reality as we know it today. It just might change your life or someone else that you know. Thank you so much for joining us today, Meredith. And thank you so much for joining us, dear listeners. Hope you enjoyed this podcast, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye-bye.
At Bioptimizers, our mission is to fix digestion. And a cornerstone of digestion is gut flora. P3OM is our patented probiotic formula. In fact, we call it the Navy SEALs of probiotics. You see, strong proteolytic or protein digesting activity is paramount to having a healthy gut flora. And of course, P3OM provides that. The good news is, unlike weaker probiotics, P3OM survives the digestion process. What it does is it basically multiplies the good guys while protecting you against pathogens, or what some people call the bad guys. P3OM really helps to rebuild your digestion. And what that allows you to do is to maximize nutrient uptake, energy, and metabolism. To find out more of how P3OM can help you, go to www.bioptimizers.com.
Thank you for listening to the Bioptimizers Awesome Health Podcast. You can find more information at bioptimizers.com.